to the mid-market brief. My name's Anthony, and I am here to host this week's news and update. Please like and subscribe to our channel, and please use our Traders Hub within the website. If you've opened an account with us, you have access to all of this. So please use it. It's all there. It's all free, and it's information to help you with your trading journey. To start this week, I'm going to touch on the elections again. Why? Because 2024 is the biggest year of elections in human history, recorded history, that is. Of course, we don't know what happened before. But what we can say is that up to 4 billion people, as mentioned in last week's midweek brief, up to 4 billion people are taking part or are eligible for voting this year. We'll start with the United States. Now, obviously, the United States does not have its election until November, but things are heating up. These are things that can affect the currency, could eventually affect gold as well, depending on the current situation. The current situation is, it seems very clear, and it's very hard to try and stay biased when you can see that Trump is very close to his deadline to pay the 454 million, which was deemed an amount by the district attorney and judge. This is a long story, but in a nutshell, the district attorney was very anti-Trump in their own personal election to that position. They actually used it as part of their campaign. So how this didn't even reach a mistrial, which AKA means that the trial can't go ahead for various reasons. It could be corrupted jury, it could be lack of evidence, or it could be defamation involved. In this case, the district attorney who's trying to charge or has charged Donald Trump has a personal vendetta and has made that very public before. The judge involved went along with it. They've issued this. Now he can appeal. There's still time for that, but he would have to pay a 10% bond, which would be basically 45 to 46 million dollars in this case. He does have money, but most of Donald Trump's assets are tied up in land value and companies. It's not like he walks around with hundreds of millions in his pocket. It's estimated that he could have anywhere between 4 to 600 million in cash available. So him agreeing to pay this would be a huge chunk of his wealth. It may not support him in the months running up to the election, which is when they spend money as well now in personal campaigns. Seems very coincidental that the reason this has sparked debate and divided people, especially in America, but also worldwide, is we're not going to go down the route of if you're pro-Trump, anti-Trump. That's a different subject. It doesn't matter to traders. We all have our personal opinions, but it's very evident, and you'd have to be blinkered otherwise to see that this is very much support for one side. It was announced that Twitter users, 90% of Twitter users and staff at the time before Musk takeover contributed towards Democratic Party. This is a violation, but no one really, pursued with that. But a few months ago, or say a few months ago, it was about a year ago, Donald Trump was charged for holding on to classified documents, and it went on for months and then eventually disappeared in the news, and nothing really ever came of it. And every time they do it, they tend to make a martyr of him. Biden is under the exact same charge, but it didn't even reach a jury. They threw it out of court, and the reasons is because, as it says here, he's an elderly man with poor memory who would be sympathetic to a jury. Our investigation uncovered evidence that the President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified material after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen, said, but added that the evidence does not establish Mr. Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. He wasn't even president then, and he had access to classified information. Donald Trump held on to classified information that he obtained, which there is actually a loophole in, but he was president at the time. So this is actually more of a worse charge here, that he's being let off because he's an old guy and they feel sorry for him, basically, with cognitive issues. He's only a few years older than Trump, though. So you can see why in America there is such disparity and division amongst the population when it comes to, are you Trump or Biden? And I'm not going to sit here and, say who's right or wrong. It's a flawed system overall, but this is what, as traders, you should be looking towards, because this is what is going to fuel the US dollar leading up to the time. If we go on to the next election news, it's our friend Vladimir Putin has won with over 82% of the votes. He didn't really have any competition. The reason this was significant also is because we saw his competition leading up to it being taken to the side, let's say. But with 82% of the votes, it does seem unrealistic, taking into consideration the fact that in St. Petersburg there was Molotov cocktails. In a Siberian station, they set it on fire, polling station. So there's a lot of that has been going on, vandalism, trying to burn these polling stations down, all the booths. And you say, okay, that could be propagandized, not really, because we don't really hear of things like that happening in America, France, the UK. We don't hear about polling stations in Australia being burned down because people are opposed to a one-horse race. Now, the reason this is caused, people expected this. This is no shocker, but it's concerning because we know that he got a lot of his votes from the occupied regions in Ukraine and in Transnistria, which is in Moldova, which I'll show you shortly. Um, so he's obtaining votes from absolutely anywhere, occupied regions that are not internationally recognized. Therefore, the international community will not recognize him as president. But again, this doesn't make a change in the grand scheme of things. All it does, though, is create bigger division between Europe, America, Russia, Russia and its allies. And these are ongoing things. So what may be seen as small, ineffective news combined with other news, these are the things that can fuel things like gold as a fear indicator. Uh, on this link, we've got a list of, according to the Guardian, not my most usual source, but it's a good article here that there's a list of certain countries that have congratulated and supported Putin. It's literally only a handful, a couple from South America, such as Venezuela. We've got India here as well. Obviously, China congratulated him, Iran. And people say, oh, yeah, these are the countries that no one really pays attention to. Well, they should, because a lot of these countries have economic clout too, China especially. You've got the BRICS, which is a separate entity designed to bring these countries together to work economically. So yeah, people should pay attention to them. They do have some clout on the international stage. And at the moment, it's in its seedling form, but is likely to grow. And it seems that the West is feeling the repercussions of sanctions on these countries rather than the other way around, hence cost of living and inflation. Which leads me on to the next topics, which is about farmer strike. If anybody watching this lives within Europe, but it's not just Europe now, it's also reaching worldwide. The farmer strikes have spread, and we've seen it spread to Finland. It's literally in most major European countries now: UK, France, Germany, Belgium, Spain, Portugal have been experiencing it, Italy, Belarus have been experiencing it, and now there's reports coming in that Finland, there's been farmer strikes. This all boils down to one thing, really, well, a couple of things, but the main primary thing here is them importing from Ukraine. It's not that they're opposed to importing from Ukraine. As consumers, we're not opposed to where our wheat comes from, but it's crippling the farmers in Europe because this situation in Ukraine, they're having to sell everything off as cheap as, well, as cheap as as cheap as they can, although they'd want more for it. And this is what happens when a country is in difficulty. Usually others exploit it. Therefore, they say, well, I'll come along and help you out and buy this off you, but we're going to charge half price because of all the dangers going on over there. This is what's happening, but this is crippling the farmers within Europe because now local supermarkets, big chains are not buying their produce. They'll be buying it from Ukraine because, let's say, figuratively speaking, it's half the price. But in the long term, these farmers in Europe will not be able to pay their rent or mortgages or their taxes on their produce. They can't produce as much. They've got nowhere to sell it. So they're throwing it away or have to donate it to charity and they get nothing for it. It's crippling them. Their livelihoods are at stake and they are literally revolting in the streets with their tractors. And it's getting more extreme. And we expect this to happen more and more worldwide, especially countries that trade a lot with Europe or Ukraine. Be interesting, I would say, actually, to keep an eye on someone like Egypt in this case, because they're the biggest consumers of wheat on the planet per capita, and they get a lot from Ukraine. So it will be interesting because we can also see, according to the map, which brings me on to the next subject, that Transnistria here could be an operating stage for any future Russia involvement in Ukraine. If that's the case, then it would surround Odessa, which is here, which is the main port of Ukraine. If that happens and Russia are able to take the southern strip here, it would cut off Ukraine to the sea. Therefore, it would really affect trade. But the farmers in Europe might see that as a good thing, ironically, because then it means they might be able to have to rely more on their trade. So this is all like a chessboard of pieces moving, and it's not necessarily so much about your opinion on what you like. It's just trying to predict their next movement so you can adapt to the market accordingly. So if we actually look, Ukraine situation in a nutshell, attacks are happening in two regions in Russia right now, and they're evacuating children from the Belgorod region. This is significant because before, Putin denied that there was really any attacks going on, and so did the Belgorod mayor down in here. But they are happening, and at first, Putin said in his run up to the election that these were Ukraine separatists, these were Ukrainian terrorists that were doing this, etc. Now it's confirmed that the attacks are happening within the territory, so there's no secret there. And now he's acknowledged during his victory speech at the election that these are actually Russian separatists. They are traitors. Yeah, they are Russian separatists. You could conceive them as traitors. However, he's saying this now because if he said this before that there was traitors, people might have seen that as an insecurity and not voted for him. They probably still would have out of fear, but that's how his mindset is. Because I think firmly in his head, he's probably believed that he's won this like a true gentleman, when really it's the people around him that have pulled the strings to make sure there's no competition for him. So yes, there is action going on within Russia. Obviously, we want things to calm down. This all affects gold, which I'll bring up here. Gold is reaching new highs, or reached new highs previously, and it seems to be settling around this region. People say to me all the time, I speak to clients on the phone, we do not give financial advice. We don't tell you our opinions for you to trade, but I'm happy to talk to you like I am now about theorizing what is going to happen in the market. With gold, the sky is the limit. Obviously, nothing can go up forever. It has to correct itself, come down, and so on, supply and demand. But with everything that's going on in the world, all it takes is one major escalation to double gold overnight, quadruple it. Who knows? We could be facing things that we've never experienced before, not in our lifetime or recent 100, 200 years. I don't want to start scaremongering and saying nuclear attacks, but we are facing these possible scenarios, and that would explain why gold is going up, along with corruption, cost of living, all these things going on in the world right now. It's an interesting combination, and it's pretty evident with gold facing all-time highs that how people are feeling about it. If we go to the Israel-Palestinian section here, I don't want to touch on the bombings that are going on. We see this every day on the news, and I think most people can agree that they would like to see some either ceasefire or calming down in the tensions or something, and that would affect gold. The only thing at the moment is we're seeing a lot of international condemnation against Netanyahu out of Israel. However, depending on the country, we then see a lot of condemnation against Hamas and the neighbors, such as Israel, Jordan, for perhaps being able to do more or take on to refugees. And it becomes such a complicated situation. And it's not an easy one to trade with or around because it's very opinionated. This involves many factors. It involves race, religion, class, history, equal rights, and all these different things. So it's very hard to get a clear picture. But what we can quite clearly see is that ceasefires keep getting mentioned. We're seeing outside parties getting involved, Middle Eastern countries. We've seen a few South American countries. And yes, there has been some neutral countries who are very much on the fence about it, who have come up with some legitimate ceasefire plans. However, either it's Hamas that rejects it or Israel rejects it, and they cannot seem to find a way to agree. This is an ongoing situation. In the meantime, a maritime corridor has been set up between Larnaca, Cyprus to Gaza, and shipments are arriving with aid. Airdrops are happening. So these are more positive steps. I mean, it's not the most positive outcome, but these are more positive steps from the international community. One thing the international community has to remember is you can sit there and condemn this all you like, but at the end of the day, you can't expect certain countries to just go in and send their troops and get involved in a conflict when there's a lot of focus on Ukraine, Russia too, or the Red Sea situation, or Taiwan and China. So, and unfortunately, a lot of it gets watered down with things like virtue signaling, usually celebrities getting on board saying free Palestine, but they couldn't point to Palestine on the map. I'm not saying that their heart's not in the right place, but it waters down the genuine compassion for this situation, sadly. So you always have to be careful what you see on social media. You hear certain people come out and saying, "Oh, I condemn this, I condemn that." They probably don't know the full story. What you need to pay attention to are the politicians, the news, things like ceasefires, numbers, facts before making an informed decision. We actually go ahead and look at macros for this week. Very interesting. In a nutshell, a lot of interest rate decisions. They're all predicted to be the same. To keep it short, they're all predicted to be the same. Why? Because someone's waiting for the first country to make its first step to cut interest rate. Once they cut interest rates, then it could show a sign of confidence and a recovery. It's not that they don't want to do that, but it's a timing act here when cutting interest rates align with all other data that's coming in. Jerome Powell mentioned it a few weeks ago that he wants to, but he wants to see more inflation data out first and time when they're likely to do it. Canada have done the same. UK have done the same. If you look at any economic calendar, you'll see interest rates that have been coming out over recent weeks, and the ones coming out expected. We've got United States here. Um, we've got unemployment rates there. Bank of England interest rate decision coming out 5.25% is the consensus. They expect it to be the same. Um, what else have we got here? We've got there's more interest rate coming out as well over the coming days and weeks, but you'll notice that a lot of them are the same as well. The reason being is they're just waiting for somebody to take that footstep forward into the darkness, see how it goes on before they start doing. And the exact same thing happened after the COVID situation. When it was the UK that were the first to cut interest rate decisions as a sign of recovery, and then Canada joined in literally days later, and America and so on. So that's what we're seeing here, a kind of herd mentality from from these people. Throughout the week, most of the focus will be on US dollar. We're also seeing interest rate coming out of Switzerland as well, and that's tomorrow. Retail sales is coming out as well. So a lot of data coming out, mostly around the British pound, US dollar primarily, some euro as well. We can see there's data that is coming out of Germany, considered high here. Um, right up until Friday, we'll see some Japanese data coming out as well. So Japanese yen, which likes to move, USD JPY, aka the rocket for a reason. Retail sales coming out of the UK, finished a week with retail sales coming out of Canada. So this week is a real week focused around inflation, cost of living, waiting for somebody to take the first step and cut interest rate decision. Obviously, that will affect which other currency that news is coming out of the particular region. So a lot of eyes will be looking at this. There's a lot to go off of this week, and please leave a comment on the comment section if you have any specific questions about it, or contact your relevant account manager who can explain more. But a lot of eyes will be shifting to my last topic, which will be shares, stocks, the earnings season's coming out. And I could sit here and I could list off 100 different companies, but this is the fun part for you to do as a trader, is to go off, because with stocks you can be a bit more sentimental. You can buy or sell a share of a company depending on your personal experience or view of that company. You might only, invest in Sony shares because you love PlayStation. You might only trade Apple shares because you have an iPhone, etc. But a lot of eyes are on Nvidia. If you go to marketwatch.com, they've expressed that this is one of the hottest watch because of the AI technology situation at the moment. you're hearing good things, you're hearing bad things about AI, but as I've mentioned before, it creates discussion. Discussion creates trading. In whichever direction is then a different subject. So keep an eye on Nvidia. The reason being is because they are now leading. They are they have the main market cap when it comes to AI technology and chips, and a lot of the companies are now accepted that and are going to them instead of rivaling them to work with them. An example of that would be Apple, who have announced a few days ago, actually, that they intend to use Google Gemini to power some AI features on their phones, their current phones with updates, but primarily going forward. This is a significant development because Apple, Google, with the Android system, this is like working with your competitor, but it's not a bad thing. It's like a merger, if you want to put it that way, or they, just buying some technology off of them to use. But this was rumored a few days ago, and if you actually look at Apple shares around that time, this was when the rumors started happening. It was confirmed, and then it shot up, and now it's corrected itself because they're in the negotiating stage. Nothing's been signed yet, but they're on it now. Any day now they could announce it, and that would be a big deal, and that is likely to push Apple shares up as well as Nvidia shares because it leads. Nvidia is becoming a bit like the Bitcoin of cryptos in that sense when it comes to AI technology. If it moves, others are likely to move, and in which direction depends on the news. So Nvidia's gone from a small team of people that used to do some gaming software for, and I remember this in the late 90s. That's how they started, as a small office of people now to the third biggest company on the planet and now doing AI technology and AI chips. So interesting to see how things grow. I will leave it there for the week. I will do this again next week. Like I said, any questions, reach out in the comment sections. Please like and subscribe and share it if you would like as well. That would be much appreciated. Put the notifying bell on as well. Always handy, especially as a trader. You want the news early as possible. I appreciate your time and thank you very much.